have this vivid memory of sitting in the bathtub one time and just crying.
I think I punched my dad once.
You're not in charge of me right now. Like, you just won't leave me alone.
I had an epidural in my back, so I couldn't move very well.
She just wanted me to keep pushing and keep going.
Everybody had one. Like, if you didn't have one, you were looked down upon.
This is a show where teenagers share their experiences growing up in today's world. I'm your host, Dr. RJ, and this is A Teen's Perspective. Hello, and welcome to A Teen's Perspective. I'm your host, Dr. RJ, and today I have a great guest for you. We have a 16-year-old high schooler. Now, before I introduce this high schooler, he's 16, so we want to come up with a different name. Give us a name that you want to be called. It could be like a superhero's name, or it could be like an FBI secret agent.
You can just call me Thomas, I guess.
Thomas, all right.
That was kind of a
generic name.
Yeah, really generic name.
All right, well, let's welcome Thomas to the show.
Thank you.
All right, perfect. So let's get to know Thomas. So share with the audience just your upbringing. Talk to us about your parents and their parenting style, things like that.
I was born in San Antonio in 2004, and we lived there about a year. My father was in the military, so we had to move after about a year or two. And we moved to Maryland, where I spent most of where I grew up most of the time. After Maryland, 2018 is when we actually moved to Austin, which is where I'm currently going to school. So we moved a lot because my dad was in the military. He was in the Army. He served for around 25 years. And he was deployed about when I was 3 years old and then came back when I was 4. So we were in Maryland at that time. And I guess for me, I have 2 older brothers. Compared to them, I didn't have to move as much because we stayed in Maryland for about 12 years. So I got like the luckiest deal out of that.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, that's awesome that your dad he served. Because my sister, she's in the military. She's a sergeant major in the Army. And my dad was a Marine. So that's awesome that your dad is serving. You mentioned, that was the question I was going to have, is how did the moving impact you growing up?
So when we first moved, it didn't really impact me at all because I have no memories of Texas before 2018 because I was too young to remember anything. But moving from Maryland to Texas recently, that affected me a lot because that was my first time actually remembering moving and stuff and leaving a lot of my friends behind as I entered high school. So that was a pretty big change.
Oh, yeah, because you moved right before high school, right?
Yeah. So it was a new year. So, getting into the actual school and stuff, it wasn't that hard, I guess, because everyone there is like new freshmen and stuff. It wasn't like I was going to be a sophomore or whatever. And there were some people when I first came that I became friends with and stuff that I am still friends with. But it was kind of hard to just adjust from not being able to go to like one of my best friend's house and stuff like that. So it's kind of hard to adjust the first couple of months.
I can imagine. Share with us what you remember about the conversation whenever you first got the news that you had to move.
I think I learned about it in like 7th grade, so halfway through middle school. And I do remember my parents saying something that we might move or something like that, and that my dad was going to retire from the military. Like around that time, I was like fully aware this is happening and stuff. And so I tried to spend more time with my friends and things like that. But it was just like a slow countdown until we moved.
And as a teenager, in a middle school, did you find yourself like being upset, visibly showing that you were upset about it? Did you try to like fight it? How did you react?
I told them that like I didn't want to move. I told them like in the early stages when it was still like a discussion. But by the time my dad like retired, there's no point of arguing it where it's going to happen anyway. So I just kind of tried to accept it as that was going on. I didn't want to move because, losing a bunch of my friends and stuff like that was it was really disappointing. And some of those people I'd probably never talk to again. But I didn't really have like I guess I knew I didn't have a massive amount of power to actually change any of that because like we were moving. I was the one going to high school. My two brothers were supposed to be getting out of the house and stuff. So it was kind of just like, I mean, if we are going to move, this is the time. So, yeah.
Yeah. And was it more of a traditional household as far as the military dad, or did you find that you had a lot of freedom? Was it easygoing? Like, talk to us about like the parenting.
Well, in terms of being able to like go out and stuff, we lived in the suburbs, so we weren't in the city or anything like that. So it was pretty easy for me to just be able to stay in our neighborhood and stuff and go over to my friend's house as long as I was back before like 6. So like I'd go over to my friend's house and we'd ride bikes down to a park or a pond or whatever and just kind of hang out. Or I'd go over to his house and we'd play video games and stuff like that. So it's pretty lenient on that. The only like real restrictions I had was on my technology use and stuff. And I mean, both my brothers too kind of struggled with stuff like that, like overusing technology and being on it for way too long and stuff like that. So that was kind of a thing that my parents needed to restrict. So I actually had like control and things like that. So I didn't even get a smartphone until like last year, actually.
Oh, okay. Whenever they made that decision for you, like what was your reaction? What were your thoughts?
Well, before I had the smartphone, I had a little, actually I still have it, but I had this little like burner phone, like one with the little keypad and stuff on it. So I could still call and stuff. So it was still like good to actually have a phone, but I didn't have the ability to get like apps and stuff. And I didn't really express to my parents that I wanted a smartphone because like I saw the ways that some kids were kind of like really attached to it. So I was really like, I don't know if I actually want one and stuff like that. But then like after a while, once I actually did get one, I was like, these are pretty useful, but they're like really addicting in a way, you know?
Yeah.
And it was hard. Like the first year I had it, I wasn't like super attached to it. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm like super attached to it now. I am definitely using it more. The only time I really used my phone was just for like listening to music, and that's about it. Like during class and stuff, I wouldn't be like texting or anything like that. I'd just be listening to music.
Yeah. So I want to switch gears and let's talk about, one of the current events, which is COVID-19. That completely changed your experience in your life as a high schooler, as it did everyone's life. But to be in high school and to know that you had to do homeschooling, that was a transition. And now, you have a future that's kind of pretty unclear at this point because we're not sure if you're going to be able to go back full time to high school in August. So share with us your initial thoughts and experience in your reaction when you first found out the news, and how has your emotions kind of changed, until now?
Well, when COVID was starting on the rise, I was kind of I wouldn't even consider it now being overprotective in a way, I guess. When it started off, I took it like very seriously. Like I wouldn't shake people's hands. I would always put on like hand sanitizer after using the computers and stuff because I didn't expect it to get bigger, but I was like, there's no harm of being extra careful about this kind of stuff. Because it was one day before we actually had spring break. Once we were told, okay, don't come on Friday, we're not having school that day, and spring break may be extended out. At that point, I was like, okay, this is starting to get bigger. So I've been taking the coronavirus and stuff very seriously. I mean, at the beginning, like I said, it's like, even if it's not fake, it still helps a lot anyway. And I just find it, even now, I just find it that even though I want to go out and like hang out with friends and stuff, I feel like my own pleasures and stuff doesn't overweigh the life that someone could lose because of it,
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that perspective. Now, there's obviously extremes to anything, right? Like you see that this could be a very controversial topic because you have people like you that's like, hey, let's be safe. Then there's other people that are on the extremes like, I'm gonna actually go party. I'm gonna go be around a lot of people and not wear a mask. So when you're seeing your peers who are doing the opposite, how are you handling that? What are you doing about that? Or, do you mention it? Do you say anything to them?
I don't think I personally have any friends who are going out and like having parties and stuff. I think the most I've heard is somebody going individually to someone else's house and like staying pretty far apart. Like my two best friends did that. But I mean, when I hear it, I feel angry about that because it's like, this is exactly the reason why these cases are still going up and stuff like that. I mean, Texas hasn't even dipped down in cases, which is super disappointing. And it's just like these people that are doing this, I don't know if it's that they just don't understand or they just don't care. I think they just don't care about other people in that way, or they just don't believe it'll affect as bad as they think it will. I mean, that just makes me mad and sad sometimes.
Yeah, that's understandable that you'd be upset. If you're taking all these precautions and kind of missing out on fun, and then you have other people who are kind of just doing what they want to do. So it makes sense that you will feel that way. Hello, this is Dr. RJ. I hope you are enjoying the show. I just want to encourage you to hang around after the interview. I will be coaching my guest on whichever topic they choose. Life coaching has been proven to increase success and happiness in teenagers. So if you're interested in having a life coach for your teenager, register at www.lifescholarsacademy.com. As a high schooler, this is such an interesting time because not only did we have COVID, but then we had a display of racism that really kind of show the entire world of what may be happening, right? Everyone witnessed a cop kill a Black man in America, and it has been on news. It's been protests for weeks. So, you're a high schooler, right? Like, you're still in your parents' house. This is like adult stuff kind of. And you're having to experience and go through COVID, all the changes with that. And then you're seeing a person, you're a Black male. You see another Black male who was just killed by a white cop. Like, how does that make you feel? Like, the fact from a teenage mind, like, what are some of the thoughts that are going through your head when you're watching all this?
Well, for one, I've known about like that stuff for a while because I'm a part of an organization called Jack and Jill. And so they talk a lot about the injustice that Black people have to go through, all that kind of stuff. And it's mostly Black group and stuff like that. And I do remember back in like 2014 when Tamir Rice was killed, the 12-year-old, when I was getting closer to the age of 12, I started to, to realize that this is something that's going to affect me and that I need to be aware about. I mean, that terrified me and it's still scary to me now. But I guess I've kind of just, I don't really know. It's a lot to take in because it's finally being more out there that people are finally seeing it because it's kind of in the perfect time when everyone's staying inside and all the media is just spreading faster and faster than it ever has because everyone's like on their phone and stuff like that. And I guess the violence and stuff has also brought attention to it because now you can't just ignore it. When it's a peaceful protest, you can ignore it and stuff like that. But when there's like places and stuff being burned down, people start to talk about it and it starts like getting the ball rolling about this discussion that many people were unaware of and things like that.
What was your parents' discussion with you as this was happening?
Well, we talked about ways that we could protest and stuff. I wanted to go to an actual protest, but again, I didn't want to spread the virus and things like that. So we discussed ways we could actually protest. And we discussed spending money on companies that support Black lives, actually donating money and I guess boycotting or not actually buying products from places that are like directly donating to like people who are against that or organizations that are against, Black people and people that we support. So that was our discussion about that. And I talked to my older brother about it too, just in general. It was just mostly events so I could talk to him and stuff like that.
Yeah. So tell me about the dynamic of growing up in Maryland. I'm not sure what's the percentage of Blacks, at least in your area in Maryland, but I do know where you live here in Texas, and it's a very small percent of Blacks. So share with me the dynamic of the two.
In Maryland, it was, a lot more Black. It was actually pretty nice too, having a pretty diverse school and stuff like that. I mean, it made me feel a lot more comfortable and stuff. But when I came to Texas, it was kind of a big slap in my face because I mean, Maryland and Texas, they're so far apart, and the people, they're really different on the way people react and stuff. Because I guess when I came here and stuff, my school I go to is like 8% Black. So there's not a lot of Black people there. And the fact that I'm like an artist, I'm a part of the Fine Arts Academy. There's like one other Black person in my fine arts class. And so it was kind of hard and stuff to adjust to being, the only Black person in the class. The people who are also here have really different ideals and ideas than the people up in Maryland.
Can you give us an example?
Well, specifically when I first came here, being the new kid in a new state at a new school, I was kind of like, I just need to make friends of any kind at that point. So I made friends with some people that I would not consider making friends with now because of the things they said. Certain people said like the N-word around me a lot who were like white. And I mean, that made me really uncomfortable and things like that. Certain people made constant jokes about my race and stuff like that. But like at that point, I was just kind of ignoring it because I was trying to just, I guess, fit in at that point because I had like no one else to really go to. I didn't have like a few trusty friends that were like, oh, I don't care about these people. I can just go to my actual friends, Have you experienced outside of some friends that would say the N-word and make jokes about your race? Have you experienced racism? Yeah. I mean, only verbal and stuff. I haven't been like beaten and things like that. Thank God. I mean, there's been a few people who've called me like white in the inside because of the interests that I have are very different from what I guess they picture what Black people should actually like and stuff like that.
And you mentioned that the fine arts, you're into fine arts. Share with us, like, when did you first get that passion for art? And, what are your hopes to do in the future?
I'd say my first, I'd call it documented art piece was in 3rd grade. I made this comic called Comic Blasters with one of my friends. And I think after that, I was like, I can tell stories through art, which I can't really do through writing and stuff, because I think I have a little bit of dyslexia, but it's not really confirmed and stuff. So I felt it was a lot easier. So after that, I just started drawing and making up comics and stuff. And then when I finally hit like, I guess, high school, that was when I feel like it really kind of took off because I got to have my first actual art class. Because in middle school, I couldn't really take art classes because I was in orchestra. So I was playing an instrument and stuff like that. So when I was finally able to take my first art class, it was really nice being able to draw and stuff. And my art teacher was like, hey, you should try out for the Fine Arts Academy. And that was like one of the reasons why my parents picked the school I go to. And so I was like really interested in like animation and stuff. So I was like, yeah, I'll go for it. I tried out for it and then I got in, and then now I'm learning like more complex and more interesting things about art.
That's awesome. To find a passion early on is just going to serve you so much in your life. So what are your next steps?
I think I might get into the game industry because I joined this after school group called Skills USA. I mean, that's where I met some of my closer friends and stuff. And I joined the video game development and interactive application competition. So Skills USA is basically a large sum of competitions from welding all the way to programming. And there's the regional, and then there's the state and then country competitions or national competitions. And so you're tasked between certain amount of time to learn something or to create something. And in this case, it was video games. And then at the end of that deadline, you would actually present it to a judge, and then you'd either pass on to go to the next level or you would be, dropped. And so I chose to do video game because I was like, I like games, So I was like, yeah, I'll do that. So I first started off programming, but I didn't actually know how to program. The game worked, but it wasn't really good. And then the next year is when I started to do 3D graphics and stuff. And I was like, hey, I actually really like doing this and things like that. We made a whole game and I thought it looked pretty good and things like that. And then I was like, I could create more assets for video games and stuff. And so I just found a lot of interest in that. So I think that's what I'm going to try to aim for, to get into a college that has a game development program or something like that. Yeah.
That's awesome. So before we let you go, I would like to hear some insight that you can share with us that will help parents understand teenagers. Because as you know, being a teenager can be a wild ride of emotions and tough decisions that you guys have to make. And I'm just trying to bridge the gap between parents and teenagers, because it's a completely different world than what your parents experience. So what insight you can share with parents to help them either connect with their teenager better or just to understand their teenager?
Well, for me personally, I guess I've had trouble with trying to speak up on what's on my mind and things like that. I mean, not even just in that moment, but just to say, this is how I'm feeling and things like that. And it's just kind of really hard to try to figure out how to put those in words. So I guess as a parent, don't pry too much, but do try to start up the discussion in a way to try to let your teen like speak up about something that is like bothering them or something like that.
When it comes to teenagers, coaching is so effective because we use proven techniques that help teens identify goals and develop actionable plans to achieve them. If you're a parent and you want to learn how to use these coaching techniques to coach your own teen, visit us at coachyourteen.com.
Welcome back, and we're ready for the coaching segment. This is when I will coach Thomas live, and we're going to hopefully help Thomas to share his thoughts and his feelings with his parents so that they can understand him or see him in a different light. So we're going to really dive in and try to figure that out. So let's first start off with Thomas and explain to us, what is your objective?
My objective is just to make it more clear to my parents, like how I'm feeling and the reasons why I'm reacting certain ways.
And can you give us an example of a time where they did not understand your thoughts or your feelings about something?
My neutral face isn't really a smiling face. It doesn't look super cheerful and stuff like that. Sometimes I guess it's hard to explain. I guess I just have trouble trying to explain the reasons why I feel certain ways and things like that. It comes off hard for my parents to understand when I'm trying to have trouble communicating what's going in my head, because it's kind of all jumbled and stuff.
Yeah. And you already said that, you are very creative, right? Like you have the art side. And I'm trying to remember, I think that's like right brain, right? Like, is there something left brain is logic?
Yeah, I think it is more right brain.
So when you're communicating, you're this creative mind in a sense. So yeah, it may be difficult, or it makes sense why it'll be difficult for you to be like, hey guys, I am feeling sad right now about this. Because you have so much going on and you're so creative, you probably could create a masterpiece about how you're feeling, right? But just to come out and just say it, it may be a little difficult. So it makes sense. Now, you did make the statement that your normal resting face is not cheerful.
Yeah.
So do you find that whenever your normal resting face, are you usually happy, or you're usually upset or down? Or
I wouldn't really describe it as like happy. I guess I'd just consider it like neutral. It's just my face normally just looks like sad, kind of, I mean, people have described my face as looking, I guess, intimidating and stuff when I'm like walking down the hall and stuff like that.
How does that make you feel?
I mean, it's kind of difficult, I guess, because I mean, people have just said that I was like scared of you when I first met you and stuff. Like I've had like multiple people tell me that. And I guess I don't really care. I kind of care, but not really, because I mean, people's perception of me doesn't really matter that much because it doesn't actually reflect my true self. And I know the people who, once they know me, they're like, oh yeah, this person isn't actually that scary and stuff like that, Got it.
And what have your parents talked to you, or what have they said about your resting neutral face?
I mean, they just like asked me to like smile more and stuff like that.
And what were your reaction or your thoughts about that?
I mean, it's just like, I don't always have a reason to smile. So that's why I'm not always smiling and things like that. I'd have a hard time trying to say that to them.
So a lot of times they're like seeing you and they're like, hey, are you okay? Or are you fine? Like, I'm worried. And you're like, hey, I'm just hanging out. Nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's because of the more of your facial expression.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've had conversations about it. What was the conclusion of the conversations about like how you guys would communicate as it relates to facial expressions?
We haven't really had a conversation about that. It's just kind of hard for me to bring up stuff like that.
And why do you feel it's hard for you to talk about that?
I just feel like I have a trouble with a lot of my words and stuff. Like when this whole Black Lives Matter movement was starting, I didn't really have like a statement or anything to say about it, but I did create this art piece because it kind of reflected what was going on in my mind. And I remember my mom asking, like, what in words do you describe this? And I just couldn't really think of anything of why I created certain things like that. But I had trouble trying to explain to her that. So I just kind of made up something. It's stuff like that.
Even today, like, do you know why you made that piece?
I couldn't explain to you in words why I made that piece. I mean, why I made the piece is because I felt like I needed to vent out something. That's the reason why I created it. But I couldn't explain to you all the symbolism behind it because it's kind of stuck in my head. It's kind of like locked in there. It's kind of hard for me to explain. That's why I like creating art so much, because people can interpret certain aspects of that differently. And I don't need to 100% explain why I chose this color or why I put this thing over there, because it's kind of all ties together on the overall piece.
Yeah, it makes sense. So your mom and your dad, they know that you're very artistic, right? So have they been able to connect the dots between your expression of words versus your expression of art?
I don't think they have. I do create things to like vent and stuff, but not a lot of my stuff is that. Most of my stuff is just me creating something so I can try out a certain thing or just for fun and things like that. But I don't know if they fully understand that, like, I have a lot better way of expressing it through art than I do have words. I mean, maybe they do, but I'm not 100% sure.
If you can figure out a way to communicate with your parents as far as words and them understanding how you're feeling and the thoughts that are in your mind, what would be different for you?
I guess it would just be easier for me to like speak up about certain things.
Yeah, because right now you're feeling like you don't talk about certain things just because you feel like it'll be very difficult to explain it. I guess that's a question for you. How would they understand your thoughts about something if you can't, or if you do not share it with them? Or if you attempt to share it, how do you want them to decipher the thoughts? Like, how can it help them to understand you and how you share your thoughts?
I don't really know.
So we do know that you are artistic, right? So it's easy to, like, if you need to vent or if you need to express something, you can easily draw something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But on your parents' side of things, they still may not have a clear understanding of what is truly going on. Because ultimately, parents, they want you to be happy, ultimately, every single parent. They ultimately want to know that you're okay, that you're happy, that you're feeling good about yourself, things like that. Now, are you saying that currently they do not have a clear picture of that information when it comes to you?
I think they have a pretty good understanding of it. I think so, yeah.
Okay, so they can tell when, like, you're happy versus whenever you're down. And they could tell also if something is serious where they probably need to, like, really intervene.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the thoughts that you want to share with them?
It's just hard for me to express what I'm trying to think in words, which ends up for me saying, like, I don't know a lot of times when I'm talking to them about certain things.
Okay, I think I'm starting to understand. So essentially, it sounds like what you are wanting from your parents is for them to gain more understanding of who you are as a person so that you can share whatever's in your mind without them almost kind of like, not necessarily demanding an answer, but kind of putting that pressure on you to give them something that may take you a little longer to process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect. So it sounds like essentially it's just them kind of understanding you more, because they would know that if they say, hey, I'm curious to see, how do you feel about the Black Lives Matter? They wouldn't have to sit around and be like, okay, give me an answer, I'm waiting. It would be like, I'll share with you in time. And then it gives you time to kind of sit down and kind of process how you want to talk to them about it.
Yeah.
Because you find now that you feel almost rushed to give an answer.
Not really. I mean, specifically, it's not when like talking about like Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. I can have a pretty easily flowing conversation with them. It's more of like when talking about like why I'm feeling certain ways and stuff like that is kind of harder for that. Because I mean, for like all the other stuff, I see like a bunch of different opinions about what people think about certain things and stuff like that. And I can do research on that. But when it's like my own mind and stuff, you can't really do that.
Got it. Okay. So you're talking about, like, say, for instance, you are sad about something. You would like to be able to tell your parents, I'm sad, and this is the reason why I'm sad.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you would want to do.
Yeah.
But you find now that when you're sad, you may bring it up, but then they may kind of ask you more questions, but you just don't really know how to express why you're sad.
It's just mostly me just not being able to express why I'm sad and stuff. Not really them like pressuring me. It's just mostly like in my own head and stuff.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it sounds like sometimes when you are feeling a certain way, let's just use the emotion sadness, right? You're not even sure why you're sad.
Yeah.
So there's times when you're not sure why you're feeling the way you feel. And then your parents can't really help you on that, because if you go to them and say, hey, I'm sad, but I'm not sure why, then they're like, well, So think about the last time you were sad.
Mm-hmm.
I know at the time you may have not known why you were sad, but now looking back, does it make sense why you were sad?
After a while, yeah, it did make sense.
So why do you think it made sense after a while as opposed to in the moment?
I just had more time to process what happened, or I guess why I felt that way and stuff like that. So I was like understanding of it more. I guess I kind of spoke to myself in a way.
But you still prefer to have your parents to help you figure that out?
Yeah.
So describe to me what would be a perfect situation then. Like, so if you can kind of create the situation where you feel comfortable sharing with your parents about how you're feeling so that they can maybe give you some insight, what would that look like? Share a hypothetical situation, what that would look like.
I mean, I guess like if I felt upset about something, that I could verbally say to my parents, hey, I'm upset about this thing, and then being able to have a full discussion about that. So yeah, I guess that would be the perfect scenario.
But that would mean that you would need to know why you're upset.
Yeah.
And do you find it helpful to have this conversation with them after you figure it out? Because a lot of times you're figuring it out after, the emotion is already gone.
Yeah. I don't really have that discussion because I don't feel it anymore. It's like, oh, I felt upset about this, but now I don't. So there's no point of really talking about it,
Okay. So it sounds to me it's like we need to figure out a way for you to discover why you feel the way you feel.
Yeah.
Well, something that may be helpful is, you may already know this, but emotions are nothing more than they're a messenger. That's all it is. Right. So think of like a delivery, the Amazon driver, he's coming by, he drops a package off and then he leaves. Right. So that's all your emotions is doing. It's like stopping by and it's saying, hey, here's a message. And then it just goes away. Right. Now, what keeps you feeling a certain way is how you interpret that message. When you give something meaning, that's what makes it linger. Right. So say, for instance, right now, I said something that made you upset. So you're like upset. The whole reason why you're feeling this biological process, maybe your heart rate increases and your blood flow is increasing, almost like this fight or flight response because you're mad, right? That is only supposed to tell you, hey, you're mad. So now you have a choice. You can either do something about it or get over it, essentially, right? But what happens, what we do as humans, we give it meaning. So you'd be like, okay, I am mad. And the fact that you're even calling it mad is your description of it, because essentially it's just from a biological standpoint, your heart rate is increasing, right? So essentially you could tell yourself, my heart rate is increasing. That's a completely different meaning than I am mad or I'm frustrated. Because then whenever you start to say, okay, I'm mad, I'm frustrated, now you're giving it meaning. And then you start to tell yourself a story. I'm mad. I can't believe he said this, or I can't believe he did this. And then you start to keep that going. And now you're going to keep feeling that emotion. So I'm not necessarily saying that it's important to understand why at every single moment that you feel a certain way. I think What's very important is to understand that it's a message. There's a message somewhere. And it may take some time figuring that message out. But when you think of a life and when you think of coaching and all, like just how to get the things that you want in life, we know that we have different states, mental states, and it's all driven by emotions, right? So I always call it a triangle because that's the way it looks like. At the top of a triangle, and this is life in general, everything about life comes down to thoughts. That's at the top. So it's like thoughts, your beliefs, all that is coming together as thoughts. Every thought you have and the thoughts that you focus on will create an emotion or a feeling. It's more so a feeling because emotion is more like biological, but a feeling. So you put a feeling with that. So perfect example is COVID-19, right? My thought is I believe everyone should be safe, all right? I see somebody who's completely reckless right now. That makes me mad, right? Because the story you're telling yourself, and you even said it, they don't care. So if you think to your mind like, hey, this person does not care about others, of course that's going to make you upset. Of course. I mean, it's just a natural reaction. You don't care about other people and I'm doing all this, I'm mad. Okay, now that you're mad, then it creates an action, whatever that action is. It could be either you don't do anything. It can mean that you're mean towards that person. It can mean that, you're so focused on being angry that you ignore other things. And what that does is it creates a result that you're not happy with. Mm-hmm. And then when you have this result you're not happy with, now you're mad even on that. Like it's like a triangle. So it keeps going. So I think the key is when you recognize your feelings, which you are great at, you're aware of those feelings. You don't necessarily need to know the thought that it came from, but just know that it came from some thought, some belief system, some value of yours that was challenged, right? Because we all have values that's inherent. And your value for COVID was like, I believe, right, that people should be safe. That's a value of mine, caring about other people. I care about other people. You said it to me. I know you care about other people. That's a value. So when you see someone is like challenging your value or stepping over your value, immediately that switches something in your mind that makes you mad. Because you're thinking like, wait a minute, if they don't have my value, something is wrong with them. They don't care about people. And that makes me mad. So recognizing your feeling will give you information about, what you're upset about. So I would say whenever you're feeling a certain way, it's always good to like try to feel better, right? Because like you're mad, I'm like, okay, let me just breathe. Let me go eat. Let me go work out. Let me go just do something to get my mind off of this. And then you can ask yourself, okay, what belief system is being challenged? What value has been stepped on in a sense, right? So what thought is contributing to that? And then if you just sit there and ponder, it'll come to you. It'll come to why you're upset. And honestly, it may be something deeper. If you keep asking yourself questions, you'll find it's deeper. Maybe it has nothing to do with that person that was reckless, as far as with COVID. Maybe it has nothing to do with that at all. Maybe it has to do with that you're still upset about something your dad said to you 2 years ago. Or maybe you deep down are still upset the fact that you didn't feel valued whenever you said, I didn't want to move. Because maybe you're thinking like, hey, if I was in Maryland, I would at least be around my friends who I know share the same values as me. But now I'm around people because of you guys, I'm around other people who don't care, right? So when you ask yourself these questions, you always want to ask yourself just one word, and it's why. So you're thinking about, you're like, why am I mad? Well, I'm mad about COVID. Okay, why are you mad about COVID? Well, I'm mad because people are not being safe. Well, why are you bothered that the fact that other people are not being safe? Well, because I'm doing the right thing, staying in the house, and they could be harming others. Well, why does that bother you? You're doing the right thing. Why are you worried about other people? Well, and you just keep asking yourself, you don't know how deep it's going to go, and you'll start to reveal things about yourself.
Okay.
So what do you think about that?
That's good advice.
I think whenever you start to recognize that your emotions are not you, right? It has nothing to do with you. They're literally there to serve you. They're to give you a message. And when you get that message, you can either do nothing and ignore it, or you can do something about it. You can change something. Like, wait a minute, I am still bothered by this move. So let me go fix this out. Let me go sit down and maybe I can go draw something about my feeling about this move and maybe express that to my parents. Maybe, I tell sometimes kids, if you're not good at talking about it, maybe you write a letter, or in your case, drawing may be a good thing, but just to get it out, just to get that out so you're not holding on to those feelings long term.
Okay.
Cool, man. I hope that helped. Thanks again for taking the time to meet with me and chat with me and to share your experiences that you're having. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you too.
I hope you enjoy listening to the group coaching session.
And I also hope that you are able to learn something that would help strengthen the relationship between you and your teenager. Until next time, this is A Teen's Perspective, helping parents see the future. Today's episode is brought to you by the Life Scholars Academy, where teenagers reach their full potential. At the Life Scholars Academy, teenagers and young adults experience life coaching and personal development as they pursue their goals. If you are ready for your teenager to experience higher levels of success and happiness, then join the Life Scholars Academy. You may sign up at www.lifescholarsacademy.com.